effectively this thing here, when we're talking about this, you know, if you were to tip the boat upside down, anything that falls out we should take off, apart from the floorboards and the washboards, they remain on, and the bunk cushions. But basically everything else should be off the boat. So just need to check it. We're going to go into this a bit more in a moment. Fuel gauges, be very careful using the gauge. They're not a good measurement of the amount of fuel. You really need to physically check it. With metal tanks, you measure it with a dipstick. Hopefully they have a dipstick with the numbers on it so we can use it. So we don't expect them obviously to pump diesel out. And just try and get as good a measurement as possible. Try not to round up or down. Hopefully you can get that relatively accurately. Most people bring their boats fairly empty, I believe. From what I've seen, we don't get too many that are too full. If you've got custom tanks, you know, they should have the size on them. Again, still difficult to know what's in them, so try and get a best estimate as we can. So water holding tanks, again, you've got to be checked and emptied and make sure they're empty. Not too many boats have them full, but then again, who would know sometimes? So hopefully the signs on them. Not too many racing boats have holding tanks, but I know ours does, and we try to make sure that we try to have it bypassed all the time, but who knows when it gets filled up. So things that you need to check. So holding tanks can be difficult to find. You know, sometimes they're behind panels and stuff, so we have to rely on the gauges to tell us that they're empty. But they're things that we need to look out for. Lockers, all types of lockers. Sometimes they're above deck, sometimes they're below deck, but really you need to get in and look inside them, lift everything out of them. It's like the amount of stuff you pull out of boats, everyone's probably encountered this, I hope, but you know, they just need to be completely empty, and you need to actually give them a really, really thorough inspection to make sure that they're empty. And so finding some of these hatches can be difficult, especially when you're looking inside a black on black boat with black fittings. But I mean, take a torch with you, dive in, make sure that we can, you know, you can make sure that the boat's actually empty. Okay, talking about the outboards, on some boats that have the outboards, should be stowed in its nominal position for weighing. It doesn't particularly matter for weighing, as long as it's on board. If it's going to be carried on board, it can stay on board. It does matter when we're doing overhangs, obviously. It's got to be in its normal sailing position. So, but, you know, take a photo of it, make sure when it's stored, so that they can put it back in that place, and when they get checked at some time down the track, they'll be in that position. All right. Okay, things to watch out for. Portable equipment, anything that's lying around, all the safety gear, gas bottles and spares, fire extinguishers, removable cockpit boxes, they can stay on board. Fenders and mooring lines, just make sure we remove them. It's like the times when you obviously leave the fenders on when you start lifting them out of the water. Not that they're that heavy, but I mean, they got to come off, and it's not good optics, because I know for a fact that if you leave a fender on and lift the boat out of the water, it gets onto Facebook before the boat hits the water. So, you know, just make sure all this stuff is removed when you start doing the lift. Okay, we've done some of this. Bilges full of water. The mainsail's got to be off. Make sure there's no forgotten anchors. Chart tables. Now the rigging, I actually recently did an experimentation. I did an experiment actually on 9 Dragons, where we had a diver. We remeasured 9 Dragons because it was dead calm and he had a diver, and we measured it with the boat with the rig in the slack position, so where it should be, and we measured it with the rig fully on. It made 10 centimeters difference in the stern overhang. So just be careful what's going on when they've got their rigs. Their rigs should be slack, basically. So when you go to do overhang measurements in particular, the runners and the backstays can be on, but put them in slack position, because the little experiment I did, which was quite interesting, was it does change it significantly when they start loading these rigs up to bend the boat, which theoretically reduces their waterline, gives them a better rating. So something to really be looking out for is the tension on the backstay, because it does make significant difference to overhangs. Okay, so load cells. Now, there's quite a number of load cells starting to appear around the country. Tasmania's got themselves a load cell. Victoria's got themselves a 25-ton load cell. New Sydney, Australian Sailing is in the serious process of trying to buy a high-quality load cell, which we will use to ship around. So Australian Sailing, we're trying to get ourselves a 15-ton load cell. So we're going to cover the sort of that covers that midfield that we're looking forward to weigh. So, but that's what there is going to be an additional load cell. We're just trying to get the finances in place at the moment. But these things are obviously heavy. You know, you guys have handled them all before, but you know, just make sure that they're good. So when we're looking into this load equipment, it's not our responsibility to physically check what they're going to put up in the air, but it's a good idea for us to be aware of what the crane drivers are putting up, make sure that their gear is big enough to carry what we want to put up in the air. We've got to check the spreaders and load bars, make sure they're suitable, but you've got to rely on what these guys are telling us to some degree. Things about the load cells in particular is make sure we get them out and turn them on and let them settle down to the temperature of the environment around us, because it does make significant difference to the weights that we get on them. So you know, just make sure that we get them out and have them at the right temperature. Things to look out for are the battery power, how much batteries particularly in the remote. But I mean, it's make sure that the actual load cell itself is fully charged, because it's a major job, obviously, to get it down from the crane and change it. Oh, sorry, what did that change for? Get it down off the crane and recharge the battery or get a new battery into it. So make sure it's good enough before we put it up there. The shackles should be, actually, I shouldn't say that. The shackles should be with the load cell. So when you get a load cell, hopefully it comes with the right shackles. I know at the moment that with Victoria and their load cell, I'm talking from, you've given me all the tips here, Lower, but they have shipped shackles around the place, so the shackles don't get shipped. But I mean, just make sure that they're the right rated shackles, so that we don't have issues there, and make sure that they're also the right size for the load cell. So we don't want them to be too loose in the holes in the load cell. So we want them to be relatively firm or sitting nicely in the load cell. So our responsibilities obviously are to ensure the load cell's correctly handled. So we don't want to be unnecessarily rough with it. They're a pretty robust piece of equipment, but I mean, it doesn't help if we start dropping them and throwing them around, because the devices themselves are quite heavy. So just be careful. Keep all the cables disconnected as long as possible. Most of the load cells we're using are obviously got a Wi-Fi link or an RF link, but some of them do have a cable. So, you know, if we can keep it disconnected as long as possible is a good thing. But I mean, sometimes you can't, and you can't do it when it's 20 feet in the air, obviously. And once we connect it, just make sure we get good connections, and you know, don't try not to touch it again if possible. Again, it's up to whoever your crane driver is to make sure that things are done safe as far as the lift goes. But you know, just be aware of what can happen. And everyone here I hope, has lifted something now, and they know the difficulties that can be discovered or can be found. I'll step on. So our weighing conditions, obviously best off without wind and rain. These things are waterproof typically, but I mean, we don't want to be weighing in the rain. Ideally, less than 10 knots, and that's more from a safety point of view than anything else. But I mean, once the boat starts rocking around, the readings can become unstable. So, we need them to, ideally, it should be in calm weather. And, like if you're the measurer and the weather's not good enough, feel it's your job to abandon the measurement. Don't feel that you have to weigh it just because everything's there if the weather's not good enough. Temperature changes during the session. Look, unless you get a radical change from 30 degrees to 10 degrees, the load cell will adjust. So, but I mean, just be aware of it. And if you do get those sorts of changes, just stop until everything settles back down again. Just going into the actual weighing process. Always a single point lift, which means we need spreader bars. For smaller boats, you can probably get away without a spreader bar, but we need a spreader bar, and you need decent slings to go around the boat. Just, obviously be careful where the slings are placed on the boat, so we don't want to go ripping things apart. Hopefully use the guys that are running the crane to position the straps. You can hold them there, but I mean, they've got to be putting it in the right place in the first place. Wetting the strops. So they take a fair bit of water, these strops, and you got to dump them in the water and make sure they're fully saturated, because they will take a little while to stabilize in their amount of water that's in them, and a little bit does get squeezed out obviously when they get lifted. But I mean, we need to know what the weight of the lifting gear is, and don't tear it out. So leave the weight of the lifting gear in your measurement. All right, so don't tear the lifting gear out, because it can change between each weigh, and if you start trying to re-tear it all the time, you start losing track of where you are. So better off just leaving the scale set at 0, and we check the strops between each weigh. So each time we lift and put it down, check the weight of the gear and record it for each weigh. Just don't tear the scales off. Ideally, from a scientific point of view, we should weigh the boat twice. In practice, what we've found is that weighing it twice, you get the same number. Okay, so like I've been weighing, going to sessions with David Callett there a bit, and we've weighed quite a few boats twice, just to make sure the weights are right. But typically we've been finding that there's no change. So it's a good idea to do it at least once or twice during a session, just to check what you're getting. From a scientific point of view, we really should do it 3 times, but the devices are pretty good. But at least try weighing them. At least weigh at least one boat more than once. So, and I'd be trying to weigh probably every second or third one twice. If you really wanted to get keen, you can put them down and pick them up twice, and just record the weights each time. Typically they're the same. So when we're talking about here, do not adjust the figures. What we're endeavoring to do with this is make sure that our scales that we're using show the same measurement on the gauge to the force applied, because you will come across scales which are calibrated, but the calibration and the measured value and the calibrated value are not the same. Okay, now in saying that, if it's not the same and it's within 0.2%, sorry, you can probably ignore it anyway. But it's when it starts getting outside that 0.2%, we really, of the point of view now that we reject scales that do that. So this is where you need to get a hold of the calibration certificate before the day you want to weigh, and check what the actual measured value to the applied force is. And if it's not class A for a start, we shouldn't be using it. And if it goes outside of the 0.2%, we shouldn't use it. All right. Ideally, if you have difficulty, and then what I have been asked to do here, or what we want to do here, is that before you actually do a weigh, you send the calibration certificate to me in the office, and I will review it and approve it to make sure that the scales are right. So we just want to make sure that this calibration factor is right. So you obviously you subtract the weighing gear, but we should be writing all of this down. So what we're write everything down that we got, the gross weight and the tear weight for each one. It's up to you, this last one, whether you want to ask the owner to whether you want to talk to the owner about what it is. But I mean, it's a bit of a can be an interesting point talking to the owner, because they'll obviously think that their boat should be heavier. So yeah, that's up to you whether you want to talk to them about it. All righty. Okay, so when you do a weigh, these are the sorts of things that should be reported. Now IRC does actually have a weighing form, which we could potentially use. I have had a look at it. It's another form we need to fill out. I don't know. So if you want to use it, I can start sending that form out for weighing, which goes through all of these things. So the form, you can write on it the actual conditions, the quantities of fuel and water, which should be 0. You should always do overhang measurements. Looking at the internal ballast that's on board, number of batteries, the cushions are on board. They don't have to be on board, but they are allowed to be on board. All the stuff that should be there, it should be noted down. Any furniture and doors that are removed. Now this goes actually into the certificate long term, so we need to know all this sort of stuff. And doors being removed, tell them that it does affect their hull factor, and quite significantly in some cases. So, but this is the type of stuff that we need to report, and it needs to go with the IRC certificate when we submit it. Okay, we're nearly actually there, by the way. Large boats over 30 meters, they still can be picked, like race boats, like things like Scallywag and Wild Oats. We still can pick them up, because they're up into the 30-ton range. We can lift them. Scallywag's just recently been lifted in Italy for a single point weigh. So and I think we could do it here. I believe we might have to ask if that can be done, but I mean, you'd need good conditions to lift it. But alternatively, for these big boats, they can be done by using the ORC freeboards. You can apply that. We can also weigh them on compression cells. So basically put the boat on a cradle and put the cradle onto the compression cells, and we can add them all up. So they can, if we really need to get a weight, you can weigh it on compression load cells. So, and they can be hired as well. But I mean, same problem goes. We need the calibration certificates. All right. So it's it's at the discretion of the rating authority, which is. And that's it. Look at that. God, geez, I'm quick. Probably too quick. So hang on, everyone went through that pretty fast. So questions. Let me stop sharing first. There we go. Did everyone get the email from me that had the policy that we're wanting to apply from within Australian Sailing?
Yep. And Chris, David Burt has a question for you.
Yep. David?
Hi, Chris, and thank you for that. You mentioned when you talked about the form from the IRC and the feedback and the commentary I'm hearing about the discussions and the issues with weighing, it would seem to me that whether it's the IRC form or another form, if we do have some consistency in what's being recorded at every weigh-in, I would think that would be an advantage to all and sundry.
Yep. Yeah, look, I have looked at the form. Like
Chris,
I said,
Michael Lockley, can I put to you about the calibration certificates? Can you hear me?
Just answer the first one first? I'll just hang on 1 second, Michael. I will send out the form I'll have a closer look at the form first and make sure that it suits what we want, and then I'll send it out to everyone. And if you want to use it, I probably would encourage it, and then we'll go with, and then we'll start submitting those with the data. Okay, sorry, Michael, your turn.
Yeah, look, with the calibration certificate, often, or not often, but a couple of times I've been told, well, here's a calibration certificate and it's a couple of years old. In fact, one time probably about 5 years old. What's the position on that? Manufacturers often
2. Sorry, I'm on the Mac.
So that's just
2 years.
2 years
maximum.
And that's for all, or do you need to get the manufacturer's specification, which is another level of difficulty, obviously?
Yeah, no. Well, we're going to require 2 years, ideally annually, but 2 years is typically sufficient. But ideally annually.
I mean, it's quite expensive to get one of those things checked. It's
yeah,
$1,000. So that's, or maybe more. I don't know. But
well, when we get one, I'm going to say when we get one, it will be calibrated annually. So yeah, so our plan is to have a 15-ton load cell, and it will be calibrated annually. So you should be able to rely on it. Okay.
So I've been hiring one from Kennards or similar.
Yeah.
And obviously it comes with an annual certificate. So again, we're going to charge for hiring, or will that be just supplied by Australian Sailing?
When we get one, it will be supplied by us. Okay. The costs for it will be absorbed into the fee structure. Kennards, we be careful with Kennards scales. So yeah. Just move to Doan Sailing Squad. Whose question we?
Sorry, can I interrupt first? Tim's had one in the chat, Tim McCall. So he says, if a load cell is 0.2% accuracy, it has a possible error of 20 kilos at 10 ton, but we're saying that an error of 10K is concerned, and that doesn't make sense. Could we have some more explanation around that 0.2% accuracy?
10 IRC is plus or minus 10K on their reading, so we only read to 10Ks.
What I'm saying, in your email you sent out, Chris, you said that if you get a difference of more than 10 kilograms, it's of concern. But if a load cell's 0.2 accuracy, it gives it 20 kilos at a 10-ton lift. That's at 1.0. That's at 95% confidence. So 10 kilos is only one standard deviation. It's not of concern. That would be a normal measurement for that type of load cell. It's not. If it was 30 kilos out, then you'd say, yeah, well, that's outside the 95%. But 10 kilos is not. That's one standard deviation. Yeah.
Well, just to finalise that, we're looking to make sure that our scales are calibrated to within one standard deviation, and most of the time when if we're getting scales which have been calibrated by manufacturer, theoretically their deviation is very close to zero. So with the right scales, that problem doesn't exist as such. The problem that we were talking about before, it has shown to exist with scales which we've been hiring from, and I'm not blaming Kennards, but the scales we've hired from Kennards have actually, if you looked at their calibration certificate, you can actually correct for the error which is basically a systematic error that's occurring between the measured reading and the applied load. And it's a dead linear thing which can be calibrated out. But I mean, the idea is that we don't want to be doing that if possible. So we want scales, we want a load cell that has been calibrated and zeroed effectively across its range. And if you look at most of the calibration certificates we can get, they are actually zero across the range, which is, you know, probably 0 plus or minus 10 in reality. But yeah. So
yeah,
getting the accuracy is not impossible.
It'll be at least the least count, which
Yes.
might be half the least count, but it'll be the least count, which is so a 10. Oh, in my way of thinking, a 10 kilo error would not be of concern. Statistically,
No.
it's not of concern.
No, and it's not. And that's what we're allowing for.
That's what my point was in your email. You said if it's more than 10, you've got to stop and find the problem. I don't think there's a problem. Anyhow, that's my statistical brain working.
Yeah, that's all right. I've done this. I've done a couple of those today myself, just for the record. Sorry, Derwin. Who has the question?
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. The question pertains to a vessel modification. So sort of weights on, weights off.
Yes.
Can we do that? So in this particular case, it's a new rudder. And the vessel was weighed last year.
Mm.
So it's quite a recent weight.
Okay. If you read that email I sent earlier with the policy stuff that we're looking at implementing, there is an allowance for 3 deltas, up to 3 deltas. I'm touch and go on this one. I'm more on the favour of if there's a delta, it should be reweighed. But I mean, Melanie, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, we'll just wait your turn, and we'll just finish answering Derwent Sailing Squadron's question first about an amendment to each weight.
Yeah. So deltas are always an issue. Now, we didn't sort of talk too much about bulbs, but bulbs are the biggest problem that we have with deltas. When you're talking about rudders, we can physically weigh the rudder normally without a great deal of trouble. So you can probably get a very reasonably accurate delta with a rudder if you knew what the original one was. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the intention. They were going to weigh the old rudder. And it's a rudder tube replacement, because I think the bearings are a different diameter, a bigger diameter or whatever. So they're basically going to weigh the old, take a photo, weigh the new, and then, I don't know, submit it to you guys to. Yeah.
Well, look, you know, again, we were going to allow 3 deltas.
When you say 3 deltas, like what? Like
three. You know, where they've pulled something off and, you know, like changed to electric winches, for instance, or they've taken off all the steering gear, for instance. You know, they could do that thrice or 3 times before, and just we use the delta and the weight changes, or they shave the bulb. We were going to allow 3. My personal gut feeling is that we shouldn't allow anything, particularly when they start playing with the bulb, but we have put 3 in there. So now, I'll come. Sorry, William. I'll come. You actually. Can I just get Bill quickly, or was he had to go? Did he?
No, we've lost him, unfortunately.
That might be what he was trying to say. Yeah, sorry, he was trying. Might have been trying to tell me he was leaving. Weighing of bulbs. Now, this is. We probably haven't touched on this, and it's probably the biggest heap of problem that we can have. Okay, because whenever they take bulbs off and start manipulating and modifying them, this is where we need to speak to people which are doing this, is that if they start pulling bulbs apart or remachining bulbs and all sorts of stuff, we need to be involved in weighing all of the parts and be able to see all the parts weighed individually and see all the parts weighed together. Because, you know, it's not the owner's problem, not the owner's fault here. It's sometimes I think that people do these rearrangements on boats, and you know, they say they're doing one thing, and you know, they shave off too much lead here, or they do something a little bit different. So weighing of bulbs is critical. So if you're talking to someone and say, oh, we're about to pull the bulb off and remachine it, really crack down hard on them and say, you know, we need to know the weights of all of the bits before and after. And it's just critical that we have it, because, and that's biggest source of where we have problems with deltas, by the way, is with bulbs in particular. The other gear you can sort of weigh relatively well, but bulbs, yeah, nightmare. The other thing which we didn't speak about is the actual determining the weight of the bulb. Way back, they used to prove the method of you could immerse it back in the water and measure the difference in the weight and then subtract that from the boat. That's not allowed in IRC anymore, and it hasn't been for quite a few years. So if the bulb is remachined, it's really needs, they should scan it, basically scan it so we get the shape, and then weigh it all in pieces and weigh it together. That's my recommendation for dealing with bulbs.
Chris, I thought we agreed quite some time ago, but if a boat has had major modifications to the keel, such as the bulb, that we insist on a complete boat reweigh.
Well,
you and David and I sat down at Woolies and discussed this.
Yeah, and I'm still firmly of that opinion. I have to concede to allowing this to be 3. I have personally wanted it not to be 3, and maybe I might be able to get it changed so that if they're doing bulb changes, it's just got to happen. Because it's a fairly significant change.
I've got one to do this week.
Yeah. Which one's that? Shouldn't I ask?
Caro.
Yeah, okay. So look, if you can get the weights of all the parts, I think we can solve the problem. But I mean, yeah, it's just a matter of getting everything properly weighed and witnessed more than anything. So, but yeah, look, it's a big problem getting deltas, particularly when they start machining and playing with bulbs, because the final shape, I don't know, could be anything.
I think most of the bulbs, I'm not sure about Melbourne, but most of the bulbs, all the bulbs in Sydney go Williamson's at a Chipping Norton.
Yeah. And
it's quite easy as I'm doing this week, going out there. I know the weight of the old bulb and I'll weigh the new bulb.
Yep. But remember, we've got to get the fittings and everything, because you've got to get all the fittings and fairing. That's all included in the bulb weight. So that's where if they're taking the fin out as well as taking the bulb off, the best thing to do there is to weigh the bulb, weigh the fin, and then weigh the whole assembly. And that way we can get the amount of fills and nuts and bolts and stuff that go into the bulb, because all of that weight is actually included in the bulb's weight, not in the fin weight.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, that's, if we're doing that, you know, you can probably do that, at least do that once. It's when we start pulling pockets out and putting pockets in and remachining and you name it, it just becomes an absolute nightmare.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. No, thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Sorry, it went on longer than you probably wanted for that answer, but yeah.
Chris, I have one question on your on the next section here. I'm not sure if you haven't got past that yet. About
Is it still sharing? Am I? No.
Reweighing boats if there's been a change of owner or it hasn't been weighed for 5 years.
Yep. 5 years? No, it's more than that. It's
No, you've got 5 years in your email.
Hang on, let me open the email again.
That's when we were talking about when the provenance of the weight and the boat measurements start to get lost. That's why that one has been included. Yeah,
and now that's a bit by discussion. I'm just going to try and bring up the actual email. I've just, but where we lose provenance is the problem. and we need to try and when you get ownership changes, when the weight's getting old, we're also concerned about boats coming in from overseas. We basically we want them to be weighed, unless for instance if they're coming from England, for instance, and they've been weighed on IRC scales, we will obviously accept that. But I mean, and there's a little bit of wiggle room in how we apply those rules. But I mean, they're guidelines that we want to use to try and lock in what we're going to do with respect to weighing. So the guidelines, there was 5. Sorry, I need to open up my email. I've forgotten it. But just gonna.
Well, while you're pondering that,
I got it. Yeah, where there's change of owners and the boat's being weighed, this is where we're talking about the providence problem, because you sort of don't know what's happened between the two owners, and that's why we've said 5 years for when you're doing a change of owner. It's 10 years nominally, but 5 years where there's been ownership changes. And there's plenty of good grounds behind that being a fair requirement, because we've had encountered problems where boats are not what they thought they were when they got to the new owner, and it's just that loss of providence.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay,
No, Mike, the reason for the question, just an example, I sold my boat last year,
and
if we
better get that one weighed then.
If we'd have insisted on the new owner getting the boat reweighed, because it hadn't been reweighed for almost 10 years, we would have lost a person or a boat out of IRC, because he wouldn't have bothered to spend the money to get it reweighed. And this is why I thought the 5 years on sort of production boats.
Yeah. Look, it's this providence problem. I mean, yeah, it's one of these difficult ones. We're trying to cover what happens when we get ownership changes. I've got one boat there at the moment which has had 3 ownership changes, because we've been doing a desktop audit of all of the boats in the IRC database at the moment, and just going through and finding out what the situation is with a lot of boats. And I've found at least one boat that's had 3 owners in the last 10 years and has not been weighed. And it just, you have no idea what's going on between the owners, between the ownerships, and this may have been all done in good faith, but I mean, you just don't know. That's the trouble.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay.
Coming back to the last question, and we don't want to sort of drag it on too long, but Peter Coleman did ask perhaps Rob Hick might have some input on the thoughts of the keel bulb weighing scenario. Or Rob, are the boys all over it, and have they explained it well enough? Sorry to put you on the spot there, Rob. And I believe you are muted if you were trying to speak. I'm sorry. We can
unmute you.
No, unfortunately, I can't unmute. I can.
Rob may not want to speak.
Unlikely.
And is there any other questions? There's a few people haven't been able to get in here, but I mean, we'll sort that out by sending them the link. Is everyone sort of? I know most of us are doing it. This is more of this is just more of a reminder session more than anything, to try and make sure that we're all on the same page, to use the acronym, use the what is it, analogy?
All in the same wheelhouse. Pun intended.
Unintended. So.
Very good.
So yeah. So like I said, we will be getting these scales, and we have found, we found a 15-ton set, which from the Australian sailing point of view, we're sort of wanting to, the bulk of our fleet, and this is some more statistics there for you, Tim. Our fleet our fleet's mean weight is 8 tonne, and the spread is only up to 13 tonnes is about the top end of the third standard deviation. If you want to have a look at it, it's a really nice little bell curve. And so we thought, well, if we get a 15 tonne set, we basically cover 99% of our fleet, and that can be weighed on the 15 tonne set of scales. So Australian Sailing's idea is that we will try and buy that size scales. The only problem that we're finding with the 15 tonne set of scales is that they're 80 kilograms. So
need 3 people to lift them.
yeah, very heavy. But I think the primary problem is the 80 kilograms is the shackles and the hook that's attached to them, but which hopefully we can detach from them for shipping purposes, and be able to ship it as 3 30 kilos and a 20 kilo box, or two 30 kilo boxes and a 20 kilo box, and be easy enough to handle. But that's the biggest problem that we've got, is that they're quite heavy. And there was a 25 tonne set that without the shackles on it, we're weighing 37 kilograms. Okay, and then we've got another 20 kilograms per shackle probably on top of that. So they get very heavy, some of these devices.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
I'm just thinking it's a nice excuse for me to come to Sydney. Road trip. Loa has a question as well for you, Chris.
Loa,
you're on mute.
There we go. Just a quickie. The Lotsel we have is a 25 tonner, and it weighs 10 kilo. It's aluminium body, and we're just shipping the 10 kilo Lotsel all over the place.
Yeah,
these shackles, which are 25 ton shackles, we have one set in Victoria, one set in South Australia, and one set in Tassie. So all we do is for $30, we send the Lotsel in a case, and the guys use it. William used it last week. We're going to use ours this coming Sunday. Got about 12 boats to wait, plus 2 catamarans.
Yeah. No, that's No, that's quite convenient. Them being that the load cells we've been looking at are quite significantly heavier than that. I might have a close look at the ones you've got, but yeah. But that is the issue we're seeing, is the weight of them.
The problem with ours is that we only could get either 12 ton or 25 ton.
Yeah.
And 12 ton just wasn't enough.
Yeah, no, it isn't enough.
It was up to 16 tons.
Yeah, because we have nearly a ton on the crane before we put the boat on it. So
yeah.
Well, that's what Dave has anyway. He always has a ton there before we start.
Oh, well, it's usually about 700 kilos, Chris. Come on.
How much do you guys have on your crane down there in Tassie without the boat on it? No, they're not going to tell us.
No, they're on mute. They're keeping it quiet.
Any other questions, guys?
No, it's time.
It's time. Yeah, we're all good. Well, look, thank you very much for joining. We'll send out the PowerPoint, because typically there's too many things on a PowerPoint to read, and I don't want to sit there and read it all out to you. So I will send that all out. Look, hopefully this session has been of some use to you. As long as we do everything the same way, and with the right type of scales, I think we should start getting rid of some of the bar chatter, which is the primary problem. I don't actually believe we have a weight problem or a weighing problem. I think it's more we just need to have take the bar chatter away, and bring everything back to the actual sailing more than anything.
I think we'll take the bar chatter away if we weigh a lot more boats.
True, and that's a good thing as well. I think try and get as many boats. Weighing days are great things, have multiple boats weighed in a day. They can save some money, and we can get it all done, get them all weighed in the same time on the same set of scales, and hopefully that slows everyone down as well. So at that, if there is no more questions, sure there might be some more, but if there's not, we might. It's nearly 7:30. I think that's probably about where we should end. There's no other questions?
Doesn't look like it. You know where we work if you've got any questions, though. Send them on through.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Chris.
everyone, for
Thanks,
listening.
Melanie.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Melanie.
Melanie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Will do.
Bye.
See ya.
Yeah.